Hello, everybody. I am so excited. Tonight, we have my former client, Allison, and just amazing friend. She is an incredible podcaster and entrepreneur as well. She is another business coach, and I loved working with her. And she is an incredibly experienced podcaster. So I'm just really excited to have her on tonight to answer all of your questions. And if you have questions in the future for her, I'm going to include her information and she'll hopefully be able to get back to you as she has time and or if you don't have time, that's totally fine too. But I just wanted to connect you with this amazing woman and resource for
Yeah,
you for
thank
the
you.
future.
All right. Awesome. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I'm going to just hit present here. We're going to talk all things podcasting. And this is so because I know Megan is the queen of systems for 100K. So a podcast can be part of your 100K system. Hold on a second. Zoom. What is this? Canva is not playing nice and presenting. There we go. Okay, so we'll make if podcasting can be part of your marketing plan to hit 100K. So if you're thinking of starting a podcast, or maybe I got this a lot, my clients and some of my friends, and I was in masterminds saying, "Oh, you should start a podcast," and you keep hearing it over and over again. So maybe you've been thinking about it, but or like Sharon, you know it's on the radar for the future, but you're not quite sure where to start. This what we go over today will help you set up your plan for the future, and how to ensure that it is profitable, it is going to be part of a client funnel and not just a time consuming activity. So we're going to go over all of that and more right now. So specifically, we're going to go over the criteria of knowing when to start. Then we're going to go over how to start it, and then how to make it profitable, how to actually get clients from it. And if you noticed, here's a teaser. When I say profit, I don't mean that you're going to be using ads, monetizing through ads. I mean through clients. Okay, so as Megan was saying, you can drop questions in the chat as they come up. I can see it. Zoom flags me, so I can see it. So when I get to an end of the thought, I'll check them periodically. We can go over more Q&As at the end. But first, we're going to get started on the 3 critical lessons here. So as Megan highlighted, I was her previous client. I'm a business coach for wellness entrepreneurs. So myself, I owned a brick and mortar several years ago, where I grew that over 100K myself. I have a doctorate in physical therapy, massage therapist, yoga teacher, life coach, and I'm the owner of the podcast, which is what you probably care about for today. I have over 200 podcast episodes. I think I started it 5 years or so ago. And it was first started when I had my brick and mortar. So sometimes you're going to hear me. One of the strategies I'm going to teach is, when to use guests, when to bring guests on your podcast, and when not to. And I typically recommend to use your clients as guests and highlight their stories and their wins. And a lot of the times I hear, well, Alison, you're a business coach. It's easy to bring on your clients because they're entrepreneurs. They're used to telling their stories. They're used to going and talking in front of groups of people. But I also had this podcast when I was a brick and mortar practitioner, and so I actually had a lot of my patients on there and my clients, and you can actually hear that if you go to the Ignite Your Wellness Business podcast. Episodes like 1 to 50 are when I had my brick and mortar, and you'll hear some of my patient stories there. So I left those cringe-worthy episodes up for situations just like this, so you can see that it can happen for you too. And I've signed many clients from my podcast, and at that time I had a smaller audience. Now my audience on Facebook and my email list is, I wouldn't say on the large sides, but it's not under 300 people, which is on the smaller side. So you can sign clients from your podcast, even though you don't have a ton of downloads. My podcast is still even 200 plus episodes in, on the smaller side in terms of the number of downloads I get and how many people actually see it. And sometimes it'll get ranked in a country, like just the other week or so, it was ranked #1 in Bermuda of all places. No idea why in entrepreneurship. And then #8 overall in all of podcasts in Bermuda. But someone from Bermuda signed scheduled a consult from me. So you can get, no matter how large or small your audience is, you can still get clients from it. So knowing when to start, Megan and I were actually talking about this to make sure we were on the same page prior to me making these slides. And I totally agree with her, is that if you're just starting out in your business and you haven't made your first dime and you're still getting used to signing your first clients, you're still getting used to like developing, I know from Megan, your key pillars and leading clients through those pillars and helping them get results, it's not typically the time to start a podcast, because when you start a podcast, you're going to be magnifying all that. You're going to be speaking to those frameworks. And if you're not quite confident in them yet, it's going to leak through in that vibe, in your energy on the podcast. Not to mention, as you know, through all the strategies that Megan teaches you with like warm leads and cold leads, right? There's time involved there. You got to post, and then you got to engage and follow up with the people. And if you're trying to record a podcast episode, plan a podcast episode, feel confident about your frameworks, bring in client stories and the other things I'm going to walk you through, and then market the podcast, it's going to take time away from getting those consults right now. So this is a mistake I wish I knew. Like when I did my brick and mortar, actually I knew it, but I just didn't really follow it. You can learn from my mistake. Is I started my podcast when I had my brick and mortar, it was well over 6 figures. So it was the perfect time. It took off. It did really well. What I should have done is pause that podcast and then repicked it up when my business coaching was well over 6 figures, but I didn't. And I kept it going, and it really bombed for a period of time while I figured things out in the big business coaching world. And now it's picked back up and there's a lot more momentum. But I think I think it would have went a lot faster. I would have saved myself a lot more time had I just paused it and then came back in when I was over 6 figures in my in my business coaching business where I am now. It would have just been a lot better. Go ahead, Megan.
And I
Did
just
you have
wanted to
something
add
to
for
say?
anybody,
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, for anyone who's thinking about it, if you have a podcast already, like awesome, feel free to keep it up. But I actually started a podcast when I was in certification. Feel free to look it up. It's called Elevate Your End Game. I'll include my old podcast and Allison's podcast and all of that in the notes as well. And thank you for also offering us to listen back. Like, I appreciate that. I think it's so fun to like hear someone's
Binge.
beginnings,
Binge.
and for me, I actually really think it's valuable to restart as well. I actually, who knows, by the time people listen to this, I might have been going on a new podcast for quite some time, but I'm actually relaunching a new podcast because of our conversation and like making sure that I have a clearer niche and things like that. So even if you have a current podcast, because I know a couple of you guys do already, if you at any point like want to relaunch a different podcast, like I think that for you, you might not have even thought it was a possibility to relaunch a podcast. Like it was kind of like, I have to do this because I've had it going. So I just wanted to say that like that's always a possibility as well. And that's something literally I'm doing just to like
Yeah.
confirm.
Yeah, you can put a pin in it and just pick it back up like what I could have done, or you can completely just leave that old podcast sitting there and start a brand new one. There's so many options, and you get to decide. But yeah, so another criteria to know when to start a podcast is if you are consistently getting those clients, you're consistently signing those clients, you are getting client results. So then you can have and feature those clients on the podcast, and you're getting consults from your emails and your social media, that tells you that you have a warm audience. And so that's prime time to start a podcast because your audience will be there. And B, when you slightly shift the focus, I'm not saying completely divert your attention from getting those consults and marketing, but when you do shift your focus to starting that podcast and adding that layer into your business, the consults will keep coming because now you have your system in place. So that would be a perfect time to start a consult. Another time to know when is a good time to start a consult podcast is when when your leads are reliable, you're consistently getting new people in your world, so you know that your audience will grow and stay fresh, and you're not dependent on your podcast. Like, you're not, the whole purpose of to launch the podcast, and we're going to go into this in a moment, is not for immediate client funnel. A podcast is a big picture game. Now, some of you might, and maybe you already experienced this. If you have a podcast, launch your podcast and you get immediate consults from it, that's great, and immediate clients from it. But for the majority of people, it's a longer game where people, like some of my people, have been listening to my podcast for years and years and years, and they leave me comments and they leave me reviews. Again, it's a smaller audience. Some of those people may never buy from me, but now I'm starting to get more consistent consults from it. But it is a longer term strategy in terms of marketing. So now we're going to go into how to start. But before we get there, any other questions of like the criteria on when to start? Anything else you want to add, Megan?
You
I
touched on
can't hear.
it.
Okay, there
Can you
you
hear me now? I
go.
was like, sorry, I'm like trying to mute. I'm like, I have my little mic here for like quality, and then I also am like muting myself. So apologies, friends. I am, as
You're
the
fine.
time of this recording, a little under the weather. But within starting a podcast, I totally agree. It's like you want to be clear. It is a form of marketing. But another thing that just the so if you do want to start it sooner, the only thing that I would say would be a possibility. Literally what I'm doing. So I did not want to start a podcast for 2 more years. I was like, this is not ideal for me. I do not want to put any extra time into my lovely 8-hour work week. I was like, it is set. I love it. And didn't really necessarily want to add any more time on the back end of my business. However, I was already recording an Facebook live every week with my mic already. And I know that longer form content, aka something that's more than like a quick reel, 90 seconds, is something that people are seeking out. Is as 2023 ends in 2024, when you might be watching this, I have no idea, but that is what some of the studies have been going out and saying. So the only other thing is if it really is quite simple and you are already recording something that is longer form, aka longer than like a couple minutes, and you want to add this, I would say that's the only other reason that you should start a podcast before 50K, if that is something that you're already doing. But it's just like another way to work smarter, not harder, and know that you're starting it with the like when I started Elevate Your End Game, the original podcast that I had, I knew that was not going to be my end game. I knew it was not going to be my, like, I almost made it like a mock trial of doing a podcast, getting the mic, learning how to like speak, learning how to make my notes and things like that. And so it was more so like not doing it as like this is going to get me clients, but doing it more so as a like I'm just learning the skill of podcasting at the beginning of my business when I didn't have as many clients and had more time on my hands. That would be just like another idea and why I in the past I'm vehemently against podcasts, and I'm like, well, if you're already doing it and it isn't that much effort, that's fine. But like, and actually, we haven't, I don't know if we talked about this beforehand, but like, do you do all the work yourself to like get started?
I'm gonna get into that.
Okay, cool, cool. So, yeah, we'll talk about that. And those are my 2 cents. Does that, like, kind of make sense, Allison? Do you agree? I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
totally. Yeah,
okay, yeah.
totally.
So that's kind of what my 2 cents is. That's the only reason why I'm like slightly shifting my tune and actually starting a podcast, not in 2026. For anyone who's interested, because I've talked about it before and I'm like, I will never. And I'm like, I might
Well,
actually
that's
right
how,
now.
I mean, I was the same way. That's exactly how I started. I was doing, when I had my brick and mortar, I was doing Facebook Lives and I was doing a lot of interviews, and people kept telling me, they're like, you should start a podcast. You should start a podcast. And I was like, no, 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 no. I did Facebook Live interviews every single week with different practitioners. This is how I built my audience. Um, all around, all different types of healthcare practitioners all over the world, for 2 years. And then I said, I'll do a podcast.
Oh my
And
God.
so that's how I had the audience. And I really, because I really didn't want to commit to a podcast. And truthfully, I'm gonna talk about when you might want to have guests on your podcast and when you might want to do a solopreneur.
Mm.
Like, I'm an introvert. You'll see a lot of pictures here of me like in leading my yoga teacher trainings and classes and such, but I was that wallflower in I think that's what they're called in high school,
Yeah.
where you like, I hardly ever talk, you don't even hear me, I hate being in the center of the spotlight. Like, even my wedding, I was like, oh my god, everyone's looking at me. Like, so for me to like get out there and be the one with the mic and saying all the things, it was very uncomfortable. And so you just want to be prepared for that too. So I'll go into a little bit of that, which is part of the reason why I didn't start a podcast for so long and why I did interviews. Which was great. That's how it happened for me. But finally, I just like what Megan said, I just started taking those Facebook lives off Facebook and uploading them to my podcast, which is kind of how I start. My first few podcasts are repurposed, those Facebook lives repurposed, along with some solopreneur episodes, as I got used to doing solopreneur episodes. So
Genius.
that's
Love
how
it.
I started off. And so it can be, like Megan said, like really quite simple to start, and it can be free and you can do everything. I did everything right from the start. So like, let's say you're at 50K or you're just at 100K and you do want to start a podcast, or if you had a podcast right now, like, you don't have to hire an editor. I have a client, she's got this platform that has she came to all this with me, that has like a built-in website and all this stuff, and you don't need any of that, and they're paying for it. You don't need any of that stuff. Like, you I started with, and I'm on Spotify, which used to be Anchor, and I really like the evolution that Spotify has picked up Anchor with. You have some analytics there. Libsyn is another those are the two most popular ones, I would say, to start. Both are free, Spotify and Libsyn. Or two other popular ones are Buzzsprout and Podbean. You can kind of just play around and see what fits you the best. And really all you have to do, I'll show you in just the next slide, is record a few episodes and upload, and you're off and running to the races with your podcast. So it's that simple. In terms of mic, I did not have a fancy mic when I first started. I used, if you're gonna laugh, $19 earbuds with a wire into my MacBook. That is how I recorded almost 100 episodes. So, yep, my mic quality was not great, but people listened. They loved my podcast. And then when I got into the 100, you'll hear the conversion of, I got this mic and it didn't work out great. Like, some of the episodes I was trialing it out. I was working with, I didn't get an editor till over 100 episodes. And I was talking with the editor. So there's a few episodes where my audio quality is not so great, and I would get messages like, Alison, I love this content, but the audio, I'm like, yeah, I'm working on it. And the thing is like, I still released the episode. I didn't hold the episode back because it wasn't perfect. I still released the episode. And so I learned along the way. Again, all those cringeworthy episodes are up so you can hear it. So you don't have to have a fancy, expensive mic to start. You can. The mic I'm using now, which I really love, is a Shure mic, and it's the Shure 7 model, and it came in a package with this nice boom arm, which I love because I can move around. I use the headset Megan's using for a while, and I'm sorry, but I hate those headsets. They bug me. They always get caught. I have really long hair, so they get caught in my hair all the time. Like, I don't like things. And then I tried I do use headphones when I record too, but I tried an all-in-one headphone and around. And but I like to use the mic for my client calls because they can hear me better. And I use the mic also for my Facebook Lives. I'm using the mic all the time. So if you want to invest in something, a mic is the way to go because you will use it a ton. And I like this because it's I can move it out of my way, and it's not attached to me. I just don't like things attached to me. Yeah, can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I was like, okay, I'm just gonna click on this from now on. I was like, but I was like, would you mind terribly including a link to that and emailing to me, and I'll put it in the group
Yeah.
as
Yeah, sure.
well, and I'll include a link for this. And then another thing that you can do is repurpose the videos to YouTube and things like that. That's my
Yeah,
plan. I was
100%.
just talking with someone this weekend who has recorded a ton of podcasts. Everybody loves them. And she records in bed. And I was like, get out of bed and record it for real. And she's considering it. But it's like, I'll include my little yes, YouTube dual purpose, like work smarter, not
Yeah.
harder,
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, you
But
can I put on my headphones when I record, but you can record I record through Audacity, which I'm realizing I just didn't put in here. I
okay.
started with Garage
I'm making
whatever
a
comes
list
with
of
their
stuff right now.
yeah, thanks. What comes with your Mac is Garage Band. I recorded through Garage Band to start, but you can also record. I'm using Audacity now. I like it better. It's easier, and it's also free. And that
Okay.
can be your editing software and recording software, but you can pull up Audacity and record through there. And also pull up Zoom for the video option and record through there because Audacity has better editing capabilities and better sound filters. But you can also record through Zoom at the same time and then take the Zoom video and drop it into YouTube if you wanted.
And it doesn't
Um,
affect the when you do Zoom, do you have to mute Zoom so they see the picture, or like you have both the mic, you just have to choose that, like the Sam for instance, this microphone, you would choose the mic for Zoom and you would choose the same mic for Audacity, or would you have two different mics going at once?
no,
Does that
well,
make sense?
you have, yeah, totally. I would choose the same mic and see how
Okay.
it goes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Right
Also,
now, I've only recorded via Zoom and uploaded to. I haven't done the YouTube option right now.
okay.
That's also in my plan for the future.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so you would also you could figure out if that doesn't work, you'd have to figure out how do you get video up while you
And
record through
sound.
Audacity.
We'll
Yeah.
give it a try. I'll put it in the group. Like I'll try it and see, because the other thing is, so like what you can do is you can have, like, right now I could have my Mac mic and I could have my Samsung mic going on two different platforms. I do know that. Like, so
Okay.
it's like I could have Audacity listening to my Samsung mic and then just
Yeah.
use like my, even actually I think that the camera that I'll link here as well, um that will also be in the
Has a mic too.
it has a mic as well. So it's
Yeah,
like
you
I
just don't want to record all your episodes through Zoom because you can tell in mine, like when I have a guest and they're on Zoom and we're recording only through Zoom, the sound quality isn't as good as the Shure mic. When the Shure mic is through Audacity.
That's true. And that would be on YouTube. But still, something to keep
Hmm.
in mind. I'm like, love it. And sorry. And so the hosting platforms are those are websites. And then the mics, could you send us just links for these bad boys? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, the Yeti I don't have a link for. I've never purchased a Yeti, but it's so the Shure is a few $100s. The Yeti you can get some that are a couple $100. I haven't personally purchased a Yeti, so that's why I don't have a link. But I have a
Gotcha.
couple clients that purchased Yetis, and they really love their Yetis.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna
that's
send you
another
these links.
option.
I'm gonna send you all this. Everything that I'm doing, I'll also send to you. So if you want to add it
Mhm.
for your people, that'd be you can. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
So
Sorry.
yeah, you're fine. The platforms here are they'll be your podcast homepage. It's not actually a website, it's your podcast homepage. And they're going to disperse your podcast to platforms like Apple, Spotify. There so you want to make sure that you're picking a platform. That's why I chose these four, because they'll get your podcast dispersed to the most different types of platforms. Some don't do them all, so you want to be aware of that.
My partner for the podcast did all of this stuff for me. That's why I'm asking. And actually, I think it's helpful for you to hear my questions
Yeah,
because,
totally.
like, and I can send this to you if you want, like, but like, as a person who's literally like about to start a podcast again and knows nothing about it really, other than like the content,
Mm-hmm.
with it. So it's like you said you record on Audacity, and then do you
Mm-hmm.
upload the Audacity to Spotify, Lisbon, Buzzsprout, Podbean, and then it goes out?
Correct.
Cool. Thanks. That's all.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. That's how you do it. So it would be record through Audacity. Um, you could edit yourself in Audacity, which is what I did in the very beginning. I did it through GarageBand though, but you could edit direct in Audacity. You would save it as an MP3, and then you upload the MP3 into, for me, I use Anchor. I have an extra step right now because I record, I download, I send over to my editor, she sends it back, and then I upload it. So it just depends if you have an editor or not. But again, if you look back in my old episodes, I did not have an editor. And I actually, because I was like, you know what? If I did 2 years of Facebook Lives with no editing at all, I'm not going to have an editor. I didn't do any editing in my podcast episodes for
And you guys,
100 episodes.
y'all know I'm cheap and cheerful. So I'm like, I am so all about this. And like, I think I think it's just so helpful. And just to clarify really quick, Anchor is now Spotify and they're one and the same.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anchor is now Spotify bought out Anchor.
And the website is if I'm looking up the websites, it's just regular Spotify, and there's a place where you can I'm gonna find it. I'm looking up all these websites, and I'll include all these for you guys.
Yeah, it's podcasting. It's Spotify podcasting or podcasting through Spotify. And
Spotify
then
for
you can just
podcasters.
start your own account.
So cool. Thank you. Love it.
Got it? Spotify for podcasters. Yeah. And then, which is different than the Spotify you listen to. Yeah. But your podcast will be on the Spotify that you listen to. Okay. So here's some other how-tos on how to start is that before you hit publish on that very first episode, which you will do through Spotify or Libsyn, whatever platform you decide, you want to have at least 5 episodes in Spotify ready to go to start, because Apple will not pick up your podcast if it doesn't have those 5 episodes to start. So for me, I think I had 6. I hit publish to them all, and then Apple automatically picks them up. It took about a week or so, and then you see them live. And if it doesn't work, then you can get into Spotify chat, and they'll help you, or Apple chat, and they'll help you figure out what went wrong. So that's the thing. If you publish, you can publish prior to 5 episodes, but it's not going to be picked up by Apple. And it's like, you could, on the analytics, you'll see that like 70% of listens come from Apple. Spotify is gaining. It's getting a lot bigger, but Apple's still the workhorse in terms of where people are listening to most podcast episodes. So you do want to make sure that you're picked up by Apple. And also Apple, is very good at highlighting. Now again, Spotify is getting better. Anchor was not this way when it was prior to not being owned by Spotify. But Apple would highlight like most popular podcast episodes, and we'll go through ways to grow your podcast. Now Spotify is also doing a better job of highlighting different podcast episodes, which is why I think I ended up #1 in Bermuda, because all of a sudden I had this huge gigantic spike in my episodes, and I think it was because Spotify featured my podcast or something like that, is what I'm guessing. Okay, so intro and outs, and that is what you hear sometimes in the very beginning of a podcast. Like mine says, hi there, welcome to the Ignite Your Wellness Business podcast. I'm your host, Alison McLean, Dr. Alison McLean, physical therapist, yoga teacher, massage therapist, and coach, where I help the wellness entrepreneur grow a profitable wellness business. Bang, that's the intro. And you can have music fading in if you wanted, and then you like get into the episode. Now I think I'm actually going to update that intro, because I think I can be a little bit more specific in highlighting the tangible result that I help people with. Like I could say I help wellness entrepreneurs grow a profitable wellness business, get fully booked, and then hit their first 6 figures and scale beyond, for example, because those are the 3 different types of wellness entrepreneurs I work with. It gets a little bit more clear. You get to decide all these things. But again, that's another reason why to start the podcast a little bit later, because you'll have more clarity on your audience and what they're really looking and searching for. And so when they hear that intro, they'll be like, oh, I'm in the right place. This is the podcast for me. And they're going to subscribe and keep listening to episodes. Now, in the beginning, I did not have an intro and I did not have any music. Eventually, I added an intro. And I added, I think 60 some episodes in, I finally added an intro, and then I added music, because at the time when I was on Anchor, they provided music. And so I picked some kind of okay music that was part of my intro. And that was it for a while. Now my intro is music that I have a friend, his name is DTO, and he does a lot of, he's a DJ. He does a lot of music in the yoga wellness spaces on Spotify, and I'm part of his membership. So I got the license to use his music. So his music is part of my intro now. So you can add your own music over time, or an editor. If you do have an editor, they can help you create that intro and that bumper, as sometimes it's called. Yes, Megan.
Okay. So also, I hope you can't hear our cat right now.
No.
He just came in very sassy. So within the intro and outro, from what I've heard, is that they're copywritten songs. Do you know another website other than this yoga guy where they're like and
Yeah,
if not, I can.
I think that would be a good Google questions, is
Okay,
like,
I've got
where do I get
camels.
licensed to music?
I'll find out.
Yeah, but you have to get the license for it.
Okay,
And
awesome.
the out is just same music, and you can, for me, my next step right now, because I'm doing 1-to-1, is for book a consult. So you want to have a call to action. For most of you, if you're just starting out, you're working towards 6 figures and right around that area, it'll be the same thing. You just want to have them book a consult. Now, I do bonus intros and outs at time. Like if I have a webinar coming up, I'm getting better about this because I'm planning ahead in my episodes. I usually typically record 3 to 4 episodes ahead. I don't like to get further than that, because then sometimes what I record is a little outdated. But I do like to record ahead. And so now that I am recording ahead, I can add additional intros and drop them in into my podcast, like in Audacity. You can like put it in there, or I just send it to my editor and say, like, I have a webinar coming up on this and this day, head to the show notes to get the link to sign up, or you could add it as an out. There's pros and cons to both. If you're adding an additional intro, you're going to make your audience listen to essentially a commercial before they get to the value, but they'll hear it, because you want Spotify is now, you can track your analytics to see how far people listen through your episode. And if they're listening through most of my episodes, people listen 100% through, which is great. So I do include a lot of bonus ones in the out because I know that they'll get and listen to it. But if you're having a podcast where you're just learning it still and trying to figure out the value of it, you might see that people are dropping off partway through. You might want to put your extra intro in the beginning so people actually hear it. So pros and cons to both, and you can play around with that. The editor. Again, like I said, you don't need an editor in the beginning. You can get to an editor when your revenue improves. And there's different types of editors. There right now, I have an editor and she's pretty bare bones. All she does is the editing. And I can add these extra intros and outs. She'll edit those and then she gives me the final product and I upload it. I do all my marketing. She'll send me a basic show note frameworks, but I have to clean it up a lot so the copy and the message really resonates. So I do 90% of the work for my podcast. Over time, like a next phase with me would be to hire more of a full package editor who does more of the marketing, and maybe if I am on YouTube, pulls like short little snippets of that YouTube video and then uses them for reels. And there's all kinds of ways that you can repurpose that content. But now you're looking at like in the market of at least 1,000 to a few thousand a month in terms of an additional expense that would pay off, but you just want to be prepared for that. It's not needed in the beginning.
Okay, just a fun fact. Now,
Uh-huh.
it is an expense, a slight expense, but there is a thing I'm going to tag you again at called Video AI, and
Oh,
it
uh-huh.
is like Chat GPT, PT. I keep calling it cheat. Anyways, the AI thing. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
it's very similar, and it takes it. And I don't know if you've seen a bunch of people where like the text goes over it and it like makes it really fancy. It's
Oh,
like $30 a month and
oh,
you can,
okay.
and I've never used it, but I'm about to start obviously like with this and I'm going to it literally just takes like an hour worth of content and it gives you like 10 reels.
Yeah, I love that.
It's
Oh,
super quick.
so video AI, I'll probably definitely start using that. I
You
just
should
started
check it out.
using AI in two ways to help with my podcast is to clean up my show notes, like make sure grammar, and then also it can help to you can drop it into Chat GPT. I do Chat GPT and also Claude.
Wow.
Claude is really good. Sometimes I'll compare titles, and sometimes Claude's titles are better than Chat GPT's or vice versa. Chat GPT is better with longer form content. Claude is better with shorter form content. So I put in there to bounce. Not often do I say create a title for this podcast episode. Not do Quite frequently I don't get a good title back first try, but after a few volley, but then now I get better titles. But I do use AI to help with that process as well. And
Awesome.
so with your plan to start, you do want to make sure that you are bringing into your marketing that you do want to market for your podcast, and that is so easy to do because like we've already described so many ways so far where you can start to repurpose and highlight your podcast on different platforms. Um, so that will this a lot of these are other ideas to help the plan for growth. The nice thing about your podcast is that it is SEO searchable. So, meaning that if someone typed into Google how to do this, your podcast episodes can pop up. So I do use AI to help with my podcast show notes being more SEO friendly. So you want to be aware of the title, that it's searchable, that it's not too long. You don't want to abbreviate things like what's an abbreviate like gosh, biz. You don't want to say biz instead of business because it's not as searchable. So you want to make your titles short, concise, and direct and searchable in a way that your client would be searching on Google, just like you would for a YouTube title and things like that. Or if you are on social media and you're considering your hooks that you're using in your kind of reels and graphics, you think the same way for the titles of your podcast, so it's more searchable friendly. Another way to grow your podcast is to just get on other podcasts. I frequently do podcast swaps. um, I rarely will have a guest on my podcast that's not my client or that I haven't personally worked with. Um, unless they have a podcast with with a good audience and they say, do you want to do a podcast swap, and I think their audience is my ideal audience, then I will have them on my podcast. But I pitch to get on podcasts all the time. I've been on probably over 100 podcasts. I've been on a lot of podcasts. I was doing them for a while back in my brick and mortar days, like one a week, 1 to 2 a week. So I was on a lot of podcasts. I don't do that many now just for time, but I do pop in there every so often and get on a podcast. Getting reviews will help your podcast visibility a ton. And I wasn't good at this. I don't have a lot of reviews. I just did a giveaway in my audience, like where if they left me a review, they could be entered to win a free session with me, and that helped. So I got some new reviews now. But if you're asking your audience right from the beginning for more reviews, that does help. It's just that it's the same as emails. If you have too many calls to action, your client's not going to know, or your audience, your listener isn't going to know what action to take. So most of the time, my calls to action are always to the consult call. And I don't highlight the reviews, but I probably could have done a better job with that. And I'm trying to bring that more into my plan now. So you can start early by asking your audience for reviews, and that will help your podcast episode to grow. And then you want to, have your podcast marketing plan, which I talked about. So those are ways to grow your podcast episode right from the start. Any questions on that? No? Okay, so now we'll get into how do we make it profitable? How do we get consults from this podcast? Or if you have, eventually go into a group program or an on-demand program that's lower ticket, how do you get people buying into your program? And it's just the same as the systems you're learning when you're working with Megan and learning how to speak to your ideal clients, the problems, the solutions, using that pillar framework. You can actually use that framework as your framework for recording episodes. That's actually what I do. I teach my clients a framework for writing emails, and framework that a lot of my clients teach yoga classes and such. So a framework for teaching classes and getting clients from classes. And it's very similar frameworks where you want to teach the problem, talk about how working with you is the solution, speaking to results that your clients get. You can overcome objections, like talking through them, like things I say is like, this works even though you feel really busy. This works even though, like, so you're speaking to objections in your podcast. Again, bringing clients on, having them tell their story. And I give my clients, and I think Megan does too, but I have a whole page of 10 such questions for testimonials where they can actually, I can just ask a lot of those questions in the podcast episodes, like why did they choose me? Why might they have been hesitant to choose me? What are results? What are their stories? Like you can get into, you want to really like create a compelling story for the listener to hear, not just like talking about the wins, but actually getting into the client's journey. And that is a great way to compel that audience where they're seeing themselves in the client, like, oh, I have that problem too. Oh, Alison helped her. I think maybe I'm ready to book a consult with her now. I don't have clients on every episode, but what I've gotten better in doing is highlighting a client story. Like if I'm teaching a certain framework, like there is a balance of, getting into how much of the how or how much of your processes you're going to teach in the podcast. It is a little bit of an art, because if you're giving in all the how, then they'll go and do it, and it might take longer for them to schedule that consult with you. I have had and heard some coaches that say don't get into any of the how. That for me is always my growth edge. I'm always giving away the how like it's going out of style. So I give a lot of value in my podcast. But here's the thing, most people listen to stuff and they have a hard time implementing it anyways. So some of them still decide to work with me, but I have been trying to get better. Instead of getting so much into the how, is speaking more to their problems, speaking more to the framework of processes I teach, and then also diving into client stories, like teaching the framework and then saying, my client Joe, he did this and this, and then he got this and this. And so that ends up being like, because storytelling, storytelling brand is a whole business, and there's a reason behind that, because storytelling really does, it's captivating and it draws people in and they want to come back for more. So it's remembering that sometimes the value is the story and not always the how. Yeah, Megan.
Everybody, I'm like literally like I'm just not clicking hard enough. We're gonna get this. I've had the batteries die like 3 days in a row, and I'm like, clearly I've either had really bad batteries or I'm like doing something wrong here. So within if you guys want to think about the framework for this conversation, the ideal framework, client's problem and solution, number one, the way you can think about it is that's the warm lead stuff in your marketing. That's for the warm leads, that's the how-tos. The client wins and stories, that's the hot leads. And then the interviews and things like that, that would be, I would say, mentioning client wins and the storytelling that you're talking about. I would mention your own story along with this, and
Oh
that's for
yeah.
cold. So it's like
Yeah.
having like some cold stories. People want to get to know, like, and trust you as you're being a huge like impact in this, and they are like kind of seeing, okay, would we be a good fit? So they want to get to know your past story and those results too. But great,
Yeah.
great, great stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You definitely want to tell and I'm getting better about that too, bringing more of my personal stories in. I have a tendency to just like dive right into the value, but I did a whole recap this year. Actually, it'll be coming out next week or the week after, where I did a recap of 2023, and I had some personal stuff this year, and I talked about it like briefly in there, but I did talk about it. I talked about some personal wins. I talked about personal mistakes in both my business and my life. So I got into it a little bit more to try to like uh talk about my story a bit more. And then interviews, we talked about there is a style of podcasting that where you're having only guests come on. The risk with it's a great way to grow your audience for your podcast, because every time you have a guest on, you're being exposed to potentially another group, another whole audience, another group of people. However, the risk with that is that, and this is the mistake I learned when I was doing all those Facebook lives for the couple of years, is that the guests, and sometimes it's the art of interviewing too, but if you're always asking questions to the guests, they're positioned as more of the expert. And so you want to make sure that if you are having guests, that you are still saying the expert in the room and the authority, so your audience isn't always jumping over to that other person to get the help that they need. The other way to strategize if you want to bring on guests that weren't your clients is who would be great referral partners. So for me, I just had someone on my website, and she designs websites for the wellness entrepreneur, and that's perfect. Like, I don't design websites, but she does, and we have the same exact audience. So it was a perfect match, and we had very similar theories in growing a business and when to do the website and how to do the website. So it was a really great podcast episode. Or like another great referral partner and potential podcast who I've had on was, she's a CPA and a financial analyst for wellness entrepreneurs. I'm not a CPA. I teach my clients numbers, but I don't specialize in like financing and saving and like the stock markets kind of stuff. Like, I don't even know how to speak to it. So like, she was a great person to have on because her expertise was different than mine. Audiences are the same. So those are great guests to have on. I have had on people that were quote unquote my competition, but if you know your, which Megan teaches, your values, your philosophies, what makes you different, then you just have to make sure that, again, that you're showing up in your expert energy. You're still applauding them and their expert energy, but you're going to highlight what's different. So I had this person on that helps wellness entrepreneurs launch an online program, which I help them to do, but her philosophies are very different than mine. And I kept telling her when she kept pitching me for the podcast, I'm like, I don't think you're a good fit. I think we have too much overlap. And I don't necessarily agree with all that you're doing. And she kept coming back at me. No, I really want to be on the podcast. No, I was like, fine, I'll give it a try. In the future, I'm not going to do that. But it ended up being a really popular episode because we got a lot into the controversies of online programs. So a lot of my clients really loved it. And I was able to show my authority because she would say, well, and I'm not sure why practitioners do this. And I'm like, I know, I'll tell you why. And I would go into it. And she's like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And so I was able to like show where I'm an expert, and she highlighted where she's an expert. So it was a good podcast episode. If you are doing expert interviews like that, you just want to make sure that they are sharing your podcast episode and tagging you and promoting that episode as well. And it's not only you. So there's different ways to do interviews. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And also, friends, we might go. Do you need to leave right at 7 o'clock?
Not right at, but soon after. We're almost done
Okay,
here. This is pretty
awesome.
much
I
the
was
last
like,
one.
thank you so, so much for your time, Allison. I'm so, so grateful for you. The
Yeah.
only other thing I wanted to add here is like, when I was an interview for a couple of podcasts recently, they asked for all my information up front. And you can, I'll make a Google form eventually when I have guests on my podcast. I took a screenshot of someone's because it was so good. And I can have you ask the same questions. So that like you can have a way for them to be like, yes, I will share. Yes, here's my information. So you can get their information, but also like, hey, also if you could share my information too, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I have that process built into Acuity when they schedule, so it's really easy. And then I get their headshot and all their information, and they get the link, so they're reminded of when the podcast episode is. And the link reminder also reminds them, like, if you haven't sent your headshot and the information, do that now. And then also I have, as a thank you, I give a thank you reminder through Acuity, and it says, if you love being on the podcast, leave a review. So yeah, you can build those into your systems, which is, and a lot of my clients, when they come on, I have one that's a client funnel, so to speak, for my podcast, and they like that because they can prepare their stories ahead of time. So I give them I actually just send them, I'm like, use the testimonial framework in the workbook and prepare your answers, and so they come to the episode feeling prepared and ready to go. But yeah, you can build those systems in. And for me, I didn't do all of that at once, so you can just like start small, start simple, and start small. But yeah, so the frameworks for helping to convert your audience into clients is, and we talked about this, is knowing your frameworks, or as Megan says, your pillars, and the problems, the solutions, common objections, speak to those on the podcast, and then have CTAs, make sure that they know where to go next. And you again, you're going to have to balance it with also asking for reviews, and if you have other things going on. So for me, all roads most of the time lead to consults, and that's why I get consults. And that's really a simple way to just get your podcast show started. That's it. And you're muted again.
One of these days, y'all, I will get this right. But I just wanted to say thank you so, so much for coming and speaking.
Yeah.
I'm like, this was insanely helpful, I feel like, for me as a person who's starting. And I will share all of your information that you gotten for gotten.
Yeah, I can
Wow,
send over
right.
the sure link too.
That would be awesome. I was like, if you don't mind sharing the slides, I'm gonna literally
Oh
upload this to
yeah.
YouTube right now and I'll send it to you right afterwards. And
Uh-huh.
just thank you for being awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
I'll
thank
share
you.
your like what I did for Jewel and for who did the connection training. Christina did a chat GPT training. I'll share your information, include your Instagram so they can see how you're promoting it. Like because it's like I think that's
Yeah, hop on my Instagram. They'll see and they'll see
yeah,
a shift over time. I do want to add more of the reels and start recording and uploading to YouTube. That's like my next phase,
yeah.
work in progress. So they can see more of that too.
Well, I love this. Thank you so much, Allison. You are awesome. Thank you everyone for coming and submitting. We all have any questions, which is great. I had, I think, plenty for all of us. I was like, these are my
Yeah.
questions. Thank you so much. And I will be seeing you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to meet everyone. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.